All right, so picture this. You've got that board set up, the pieces all lined up and ready to go.
And you're hearing that really satisfying click-clack as you move those pieces, the dice rolling.
Yeah, the dice. You're hoping for that perfect roll to take out your opponent. That's backgammon.
It is, and so much more. Today we're diving deep into backgammon.
A game that's way more than just luck.
It's about strategy and history and outsmarting your opponent. A game that's been around for well over 1,000 years.
Backgammon. It's the most well-known Western game in a huge family of what are called tables games.
Yeah. Those have been around in one form or another for at least 1,600 years, give or take.
Wow. So the backgammon we all know and maybe love.
It really kind of hit the scene in 17th century England, evolving from an earlier game called Irish, which goes back to the 16th century.
So while similar games have been played for ages, backgammon itself has a more recent story. A fascinating one, though. So for those who haven't played, what's the basic idea? You're trying to be the first to get all your pieces, all 15 of them, off the board.
Right. You've got to move those 15 pieces around a board with 24 points, and those dice rolls, well, they determine your moves.
And of course, the player who gets all their pieces off first, that's the winner. Right?
Yeah, it is. We call that bearing off.
Bearing off. Okay. But wait, there's this thing called a backgammon, which is where the game gets its name, right?
Exactly. Now, imagine this. You manage to bear off all your pieces before your opponent even gets one of theirs off. And they still have pieces stuck on the bar or in your home board. Well, that, my friend, is a backgammon.
Triple win.
A triple win, yes, like a total knockout. You're really showing them who's boss.
So it's a game of skill, not just blind luck.
Well, that's what's so cool about backgammon. It's this perfect blend of strategy and chance. Sure, one game could totally come down to a lucky roll. But over many games, between the same players, the better strategist, the one who really understands the game, they're going to come out on top. It's all about making the most of every roll, planning your moves, and trying to anticipate what your opponent might do.
Okay, that's where the strategy comes in, because I imagine with those dice rolls, there must be a ton of different ways to move your pieces.
Oh, absolutely. And each choice you make impacts the game, not just for that turn, but for the turns ahead. You've got to be thinking several steps ahead, and you're always trying to stay a step ahead of your opponent.
And don't forget about that mysterious little cube with numbers on it.
Ah, yes, the doubling cube. That little thing adds a whole other layer of strategy. It lets a player say, hey, I think I'm doing pretty well. Let's raise the stakes. And then their opponent has to decide, do they want to play for higher stakes, or do they fold right then and there?
So we've got this game with ancient roots, this cool goal of being the first to bear off all your pieces, and this super intriguing balance of skill and luck. I'm ready to dig into the history, see how backgammon came to be.
All right, well, when we talk about backgammon's history, it's really important to understand it within this broader context of tables games.
Yeah.
For centuries, if you look at art from all around the world, you'll find images of people playing games with boards, counters, and dice things that look very familiar to a backgammon set.
Yeah, I can see how that might be misleading. Makes you think backgammon itself is super old.
It does. But the backgammon we know, it's more like a teenager compared to the really long history of gaming in general.
But a teenager with some seriously old ancestors, it sounds like.
Oh, definitely. Archaeologists have found evidence of board games going back thousands of years. Like the oldest game set we know of, it's about 5,000 years old, was found in the Jiroft culture in what's now Iran.
Wow, 5,000 years old.
It had this interesting dumbbell-shaped board, counters, and dice. We don't know the exact rules, of course.
Okay.
But it just shows you how far back this idea of board game competition goes.
And then there's the royal game of which is even older, right?
The royal game of is a bit younger, from around 2600 BC. It was found in Mesopotamia, and it's another possible ancestor of backgammon. What's really cool about this one is that we actually know the rules. It used these tetrahedral dice, which are like little pyramids, pretty different from the six-sided dice we use today.
Cool. So we're talking about really ancient games here.
Yes, and there are tons more. I mean, archaeologists have found all sorts of board games from ancient sites in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Western Iran, all dating from around the 10th to the 7th centuries BC. So the idea of two players moving pieces on a board based on random rolls, that's a really old idea.
So fast forward now to the Sasanian Empire.
Right. Between the 3rd and 6th centuries AD, the Persians had this tables game called Nard, or sometimes Nardir.
Nard.
And there are actually two stories about where it came from. One says it was invented by Ardashir I, who started the Sasanian dynasty. But another story credits Bozorgmer Bogtigan, who was the vizier of Khosrow I. We don't know for sure who invented it, But either way, nard is a crucial link in the chain leading to backgammon.
And what about the Romans and the Byzantines? Didn't they play some kind of ancestor to backgammon?
They sure did. The earliest tables game we can identify from that period is called tabula. We know about it from an epigram by the Byzantine Emperor Zeno from the late 5th century AD. Tabula was played on a 24-point board, 15 pieces per player, and you had to be the first to bear off all your pieces, just like backgammon.
So the goal was the same.
Exactly, but there were some key differences. Tabula used the 3 dice instead of 2, there was no bar in the middle of the board, and all the pieces started off the board.
Interesting. So they had to enter the board somehow, kind of like in backgammon when you get knocked off and have to re-enter.
Exactly, and even the rules for hitting a blot, a single opposing checker, and for bearing off, they were actually the same in tabula as they are in backgammon today. The Greek name for this kind of game is tavli, and it's still used in Greece today.
And tavli is thought to have come from an even older Roman game.
That's the leading theory, yeah. They think tavli evolved from a Roman game called Ludus Duodecim Scriptorum, which translates to Game of 12 Lines.
Okay.
This game had 3 rows of 12 points, so 36 points total, and the 15 pieces moved in opposite directions. We don't know all the rules, unfortunately, but it might have been related to an ancient Greek game called Kubeia. The earliest mention of this game is in Ovid's Ars Amatoria from around the beginning of the 1st millennium AD. Romans sometimes called it alea, too, which just means dice.
So we've got these tables games making their way all over the ancient world. What happened when they reached Western Europe?
Well, they made a splash. Tables games landed in France around the 11th century and became super popular, especially for gambling. They were so popular that in 1254, King Louis IX actually tried to ban them from his court.
Oh, wow, really?
He didn't want people gambling so much. But even that didn't stop them. They spread to Germany in the 12th century, made it to Iceland by the 13th century, and in Spain in 1283, there's this manuscript called Libro de los Juegos that King Alfonso X commissioned.
Libro de los Juegos.
It's a book that describes all sorts of games, including chess and, of course, tables games. And get this, in the 17th century, we know they were even playing these games in Sweden. They found a board and counters on the Vasa shipwreck.
Wow, that's amazing. So these games were everywhere.
They really were. You even see them in a lot of Dutch and German paintings from that time.
So let's get back to backgammon itself.
Yes.
You said it evolved from a 16th century game called Irish.
That's right. Irish was the game they played in England and Scotland. It's basically the same as the French deux tables and the Spanish todas tablas. What's funny is that when backgammon started to appear in the early 17th century, Irish was actually seen as the more serious, skillful game.
So backgammon was kind of the new kid on the block.
It was. And there was another game in medieval Italy called Barrail, played on a board that looks a lot like a backgammon board, but with a big twist. Both players moved counterclockwise, starting from the same side.
So the board was becoming more familiar, but the way they played was still evolving. So when does the name backgammon actually appear?
The first time we see it is in a letter from 1635, written by a guy named James Howell. He spells it baggammon, though.
Backgammon.
And it probably comes from the words back and gammon, which is Middle English for game or play. The Oxford English Dictionary records it first in 1650. Interestingly, in 1666, there's a mention of tables being an old name for backgammon.
Right, but as you said before, tables was really a general term.
It was, like saying card game instead of poker or bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So were there actual written rules for backgammon back then?
The first ones we know of were written by Francis Willoughby around 1672. Then a guy named Charles Cotton wrote another set in 1674. Even though there were laws against playing tables games in 16th century England, backgammon became more popular than Irish by the 18th century. It was even played by clergy. Edmund Hoyle, the guy who wrote all those game guides?
Yeah.
Well, he published a treatise on backgammon in 1753 that explained the rules and some basic strategy.
So how different was this early backgammon from what we play today?
A lot of the basics were similar. The goal was still to be the first to bear off. The board layout was pretty much the same number of pieces, same direction of movement, and the starting positions were also pretty similar.
Okay.
But there were some important differences. They didn't have the doubling cube back then, and the bar in the middle. It either didn't exist or they didn't use it the same way. If a piece got hit, it was just temporarily taken off the board. And the scoring was different, too. You got a double win if you rolled doubles to win, or if your opponent still had pieces outside their home board. And a triple win, the backgammon, happened if you got all your pieces off before your opponent even got one piece to their home board.
So it was definitely evolving, getting closer to the modern game. When did those big changes really solidify?
Most of the rules we use today were in place by around 1850. That's when they started using the central bar, and when the rule that hit pieces have to go on the bar and then re-enter came into play, and the scoring terms changed too. Now, winning by bearing off all your pieces before your opponent bears off any is called a gammon, which is a double win worth 2 points. And the backgammon worth 3 points is when you bear off all your pieces before your opponent bears off any, and they still have pieces on the bar or in your home board.
That makes more sense.
It does, right? Much clearer. But then a real game changer came along. The doubling cube.
Ah, yes, the doubling cube. How did that come into play?
Well, in the old days, they'd sometimes use matches to keep track of doubles and when the stakes might be higher.
Like literally matches.
Yeah, just regular matches that you'd light a candle with. They'd put them on the bar to show that the stakes had been doubled. But the actual doubling cube, the one we know with the numbers on it, was introduced in the 1920s in New York City.
Of course, it had to be New York.
Right. They loved their games there. And it really changed everything. Before, it was all about making the best move on each turn. But now you had to think about the odds of winning, the risks and rewards of doubling, and how your opponent might react. Suddenly, it became a game of expected value.
So a lot more strategic thinking was needed?
Absolutely. It added this whole psychological element, this game within the game, you know? And then in the mid-1960s, backgammon just exploded in popularity. A lot of that was thanks to a guy named Prince Alexis Obolensky. They called him the father of modern backgammon.
I've heard that name. What did he do that was so important?
Well, for one thing, he was really good at getting people excited about the game. He co-founded the International Backgammon Association, which published a standardized set of rules.
Right, so everyone was playing by the same rules.
Exactly. Before that, there were all these variations. But he wanted to make it more official, more professional. He also started the World Backgammon Club in Manhattan, which became a hub for all the serious players. And then he designed this tournament system in 1963 and organized the first big international backgammon tournament in 1964.
So he was really the driving force behind making backgammon a big deal.
He was. And it worked. The game became super trendy. Everyone was playing, from college students to celebrities, even Wall Street guys. Businesses started sponsoring tournaments. Hugh Hefner had backgammon parties at the Playboy Mansion. It was the thing to do.
Wow, sounds like the golden age of backgammon.
It really was. More backgammon clubs popped up. The World Championship was established in Las Vegas in 1967. And then later on, new terms like beaver and checkers started being used more widely, mostly coming from the U.S. And today, you've got organizations like the United States Backgammon Federation and the UK Backgammon Federation making sure the game stays popular and everyone's playing by the same rules.
What about the impact of computers? They've changed so many games.
Oh, computers have been huge for backgammon. In the 1990s, they started developing software that could not only play the game, but also analyze positions and recommend moves. Some early programs, like Johnson's Expert Backgammon, were pretty good, but then they started using neural networks. Programs like TD Gammon, Jellyfish, and later Snowy and Nub completely revolutionized the game. These programs could learn from playing millions of games against themselves and eventually became as good as, or even better than, the best human players.
So basically, computers became backgammon masters.
They did. And today, programs like Extreme Gammon are considered the gold standard. All the serious players use them to study the game and improve their skills. And of course, you can't forget about online play. There are tons of platforms where you can play backgammon against people from all over the world.
It's incredible how this game has not only survived, but thrived through so many changes over the centuries. Okay, I think we've covered the history pretty well.
I think so.
So now let's get into the actual rules of the game. Like, how do you actually play backgammon?
Great. The World Backgammon Federation has been working since 2018 to maintain consistent rules, especially for tournaments. And, the pieces are often called checkers in the U.S., but men is the more traditional term. But no matter what you call them, the goal is still the same. Be the first to get all 15 of yours off the board. And a lot of times, people play backgammon in matches, where you have to reach a certain score to win.
So let's start with the board itself. How's it set up?
A standard tournament board is usually around 17 by 22 inches when it's open, up to 26 by 34 inches. Each side has 12 long triangles called points, so there are 24 in total. And they make this horseshoe shape around the board. Each point is numbered from 1 to 24, and you start with 15 checkers on specific points. 2 go on your 24 point, which is your opponent's 1 point. 3 on your 8 point, and then 5 each on your 13 point and your 6 point.
Okay.
The two players move their pieces in opposite directions around the board. You start at the 24 point and move toward your 1 point.
So it's kind of like a race, in a way.
It is very much so, and there are different names for the different areas of the board. Your 1 point to 6 point is called your home board or inner board. Then you have the outer board, which is points 7 to 12. The 7 point next to the bar is called the bar point. The 13 point is the midpoint, and the 5 point, it's often called the golden point.
Golden point. That sounds important.
It is. It's a strategically important point to control.
Okay, so now we've got the board set up, the pieces are in place. How do you actually start a game? How do those checkers move?
All right, so to start, both players roll 1 die. Whoever rolls higher gets to go first.
And they use both dice for their first move.
They do. They use the numbers on both dice to move their pieces. After that, each player rolls 2 dice at the start of their turn.
Okay.
You have to use both dice if possible. So let's say you roll a 6 and a 3. You could move one checker 6 points and another checker 3 points.
Gotcha.
Or you could move one checker 9 points, as long as you can land legally on a point after moving 6. Doubles are a bit special. If you roll a 5 and a 5, you get to move 4 times 5 points each time.
Wow, that's a lot of movement.
It is, but there are some restrictions. If you can only use one of the numbers you rolled, you have to use the higher one.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if using one die then allows you to use the other die, you have to make both moves. You can't just choose to use one if you can use both.
So you have to move as much as you can, basically.
Exactly. You can't just sit there and wait for a better roll.
So what happens if you land on a point with your opponent's checkers on it?
Well, you can land on an empty point, a point with one or more of your own checkers, or a point with just one of your opponent's checkers. We call that single checker a blot.
Right, a blot.
Now, if you land on a blot, you've hit it, and that checker goes on the bar in the middle of the board.
Oh, I see. So it's a way to send your opponent back.
Exactly. But you can never land on a point that has 2 or more of your opponent's checkers on it. It's got to be open or have a single blot. And there's no limit to how many checkers can be on one point or on the bar.
I see. So what happens if you have a checker on the bar? How do you get it back in the game?
You have to re-enter those checkers onto your opponent's home board, and you have to do that before you can move any other checkers.
Okay.
The numbers you roll on the dice tell you which points you can enter on. So if you roll a 1, you can put your checker on your opponent's 24 point, which is their 1 point. A 2 lets you enter on their 23 point, and so on. You can't enter on a point with 2 or more of their checkers, but you can enter on an empty point or on a point with a blot. And if you land on a blot, you hit it, and their checker goes on the bar.
Okay, it's like a battle to control the point.
It is, and you can't move anything else until all your checkers are off the bar. Now, if you roll the dice and you can't re-enter any of your checkers because all the legal points are blocked, you lose your turn.
Ouch. That doesn't sound good.
Nope. And if your opponent has all 6 points in their home board blocked with 2 or more checkers, you're stuck. You can't enter until they open up a point.
That sounds brutal.
It can be. But here's something cool. Before you pick up your dice at the end of your turn, you can actually undo and redo your moves as many times as you want.
Really? So you can try out different strategies before you finalize your move?
Exactly. You can experiment and see what works best before you commit.
That's pretty neat. So eventually you want to get all your checkers into your home board so you can start taking them off.
Right. That's the goal. Get all 15 checkers into your home board so you can start bearing off.
And how does bearing off work?
Once all your checkers are in your home board, you can start taking them off using the numbers you roll on the dice. A 1 lets you take off a checker from your 1 point, a 2 from your 2 point, and so on. If you roll a number higher than any point with a checker on it, you take off a checker from your highest occupied point. For example, let's say you roll a 6 and a 5, but your highest checker is on your 5 point. You'd take off 2 checkers from your 5 point.
I see. You have to use the higher number even if it means taking off a checker from a lower point.
Exactly. But you can also choose to move a checker forward instead of bearing it off, even if you don't use the full value of the roll. That can be a strategic choice, especially if you think you might be able to hit a blot on your next turn.
So there's a lot of strategy involved even when you're bearing off.
There is. You have to think about your opponent's position, what they might roll, and what will give you the best advantage. Just like before, if you can use all the numbers you rolled, either by moving or bearing off, you have to do it. And here's a catch. If your opponent hits one of your checkers while you're bearing off, you have to bring that checker back in and move it all the way around to your home board before you can continue bearing off.
Okay, that's a good thing to keep in mind. So how do you actually win a game? Is it just the first person to bear off all their checkers?
Well, it depends how far ahead you are when you bear off. If your opponent has already borne off at least one checker, you just win a single game, worth 1 point. But if you bear off all your checkers before your opponent has borne off any, that's a gammon.
Gammon, okay.
It's worth 2 points, so it's a bigger win. And then there's the ultimate win, a backgammon.
Triple win.
That's right, 3 points. This happens when you bear off all your pieces before your opponent has borne off any, and they still have checkers either on the bar or in your home board.
Oh, I see. So you've really shut them out completely.
Exactly. It's a satisfying win.
Now, we haven't really talked about the doubling cube yet. How does that fit into the rules and scoring?
The doubling cube is a really interesting element in backgammon. It has two main purposes. First, it can speed up the game, especially in matches. And second, it adds this whole strategic level to the game. It's not a die, by the way. It's just this marker with the powers of 2 on its faces. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64.
Okay.
At the beginning of the game, the cube is in the middle of the board, showing the 64, which we call on 1. Now, let's say you're playing and you think you have a good advantage. You can offer to double the stakes of the game. Your opponent then has to decide. Either take the double, meaning they agree to play for higher stakes, or drop, which means they concede the game and lose at the current cube value.
So there's some risk involved.
Definitely. If they take the double, the cube goes on their side of the board, showing the new stake, and only they can offer the next double. But if they drop, they lose the game right there. And there's no limit to how many times you can double during a game.
So the stakes can get really high really fast.
They can, especially with skilled players. And in some informal money games, there's this rule called a beaver. Let's say you've just been doubled. You can immediately redouble back at your opponent and keep possession of the cube.
Oh, wow, that's aggressive.
It is. It's like saying, I'm not scared of your double, bring it on. There's also a variation called a raccoon, where the original doubler, seeing a beaver, can then double again immediately.
Sounds like things can get pretty wild with the doubling cube.
It can be a real psychological battle.
So are there any other special rules with the doubling cube?
There are a few more. Sometimes in casual games, people use the Murphy rule, also called an automatic double. This means if both players roll the same number on the opening roll, the cube automatically doubles to 2, but it stays in the middle. This can happen several times at the start of the game.
Oh, wow. So the stakes can go up even before the game really gets going?
Yeah, but it's not a standard rule in official games. Another important rule, used a lot in money games, is the Jacoby rule.
Jacoby rule.
This one says that gammons and backgammons only count for their double or triple value if the doubling cube has been used in the game. So if you're way ahead and you think you can get a gammon or backgammon, you might want to offer a double just to make sure you get those extra points.
That's a good strategy.
It is. And then there's the Crawford rule, which is super important in match play. If you're just 1 point away from winning the whole match, the next game is called the Crawford game.
Crawford game, okay.
And in this game, no one can use the doubling cube. It's there to prevent someone who's losing from just doubling like crazy to try and catch up.
Makes sense.
Right. And after the Crawford game, you can use the doubling cube again normally. There's also something called the Holland rule, but it's not used very often. It says that you can't double until both players have rolled the dice at least twice after the Crawford game.
Wow, so there are a lot of rules surrounding the doubling cube.
It's a small cube, but it has a huge impact on the game.
So we've talked about the history and the rules of backgammon. But backgammon isn't the only game of its kind, right?
Absolutely not. Backgammon is part of a whole family of tables games. They all share this basic concept of moving pieces around a board based on dice rolls, but they have different goals, different ways of playing, and different strategies.
Are there other tables games that are really popular?
Oh, definitely. You'll find all sorts of variations, many of them tied to specific regions of the world. Some games have different starting positions, others have special rules for movement, some have special dice values, and some even have players moving their pieces in different directions. It's amazing how much variety there is.
So can you give us a few examples of these backgammon relatives?
Sure. One popular one is called Acey-Deucey. In Acey-Deucey, you start with an empty board, and you have to roll specific combinations to bring your pieces on. The 1-2 roll is really powerful in this game.
Why is that?
Well, if you roll a 1-2, you get to make those moves, and then you get to choose any doubles roll you want. Like you could say, I want to roll 6-6, and then you get to move 4 times 6 points each time, and you get an extra turn after rolling 1-2 or any doubles.
Oh, wow. So it's all about getting that 1-2 roll.
It is. It's a really fast-paced game. Then there's Hypergammon, which is a super interesting one. You only start with 3 checkers on your 24th, 23rd, and 22nd points. It's a much shorter game, and because it's less complex, computers have actually solved it.
Solved it.
Yeah, they know the perfect strategy for every possible position.
Wow, that's incredible. Are there any others?
We've got Nard, which is that Persian game we talked about earlier.
Right, Nard.
It has a different starting layout, and you can't hit pieces in that one. There are no gammons or backgammons either.
Yeah.
And then there's Bansugoroku, which is a Japanese game. It actually starts with the same setup as backgammon, but it has slightly different rules for movement and bearing off.
Interesting.
In Russian backgammon, you start with no checkers on the board, and you move your pieces in parallel directions. And doubles are super powerful in that one. There are also games like Gulbara and Tapa that are really popular in Southeastern Europe and Turkey.
Gulbara and Tapa.
They often play those games alongside backgammon. And let's not forget about Kowanki, which is an ancient Chinese game. And in Greece, they have 3 Tavli games, Plakoto, Fevga, and Portes.
Plakoto, Fevga, and Portes.
They usually play those in sequence.
Wow, it's amazing how many variations there are.
It is. It shows you how much creativity and strategic thinking people have put into this kind of game over the centuries. And then you have more unusual games like Misere, where you actually try to be the last player to bear off all your checkers. And Tavla, which is a Turkish game that's kind of like backgammon, but with its own special rules.
It sounds like a whole world of tables games out there.
It really is. And I encourage everyone to explore them. You might find a new favorite.
I might just do that. Okay, so we've covered the history and the rules and even all these related games. But what about the strategy, the tactics? What separates a good backgammon player from a great one?
That's where it gets really interesting. Now,